Okay, good morning, everyone. Masechta Bava Kama. We're on Daf Pei Hey Amud Aleph, and we're in Perek HaChoivel. And we said the Perek HaChoivel is dealing with a person who damages their friend, and we said there's 5 separate payments. We established that the payment of nezek is a mandatory payment and not literal. We're not taking off any organs or any parts or bruising anybody who does the damage. We're rather taking payment from him. We discussed whether you can take the payment in bovel or whether you cannot take the payment or not, and therefore we're now discussing with the issue of tsar. We're now discussing a little bit about the payment of tsar, and which is pain that you have to pay for somebody. So the Mishnah told us the halacha that the Mishnah said was if somebody caused a burn to their friend on their fingernail or with a little bit of with a nail. If it didn't make a chabura, the way you evaluate such a pain is by saying how much would a person similarly in his kind of physical strength to this victim take in order to suffer such a pain, and that's the amount that you pay. Now the Gemara starts as follows. Tsar, we're about 5 lines down from the top at the 2 dots. Tsar b'mokom nezek heichi shaminon. The Mishnah told us a case where there was only tsar involved. Only tsar was a little bit of a prick on the guy's nail, caused him tsar, didn't cause him boishis, didn't cause him nezek. His value as a slave didn't go down, didn't cause him to be out of work. It only caused him tsar. The Gemara is discussing how do you deal with the evaluation of tsar, pain, when there is nezek involved, which means to say the guy's value depreciated on the slave market, and you pay for that. So seemingly you've paid for the arm. So why are you paying another additional pain of? Why are you paying for another additional thing of tsar? You seemingly have covered everything by paying how much he was on the slave market. That's what the question of the Gemara is, as Rashi explains it. Amar Ravua de Shmuel, says the father of Shmuel, Oimdim kama adam roitze litzoil liktoya lo yodoy liktoya lo yodoy. How much would a person take in order? How much would a person take if someone says to you, "Listen, I'm going to chop off your arm, and I'm going to pay you a certain amount of money"? What is the amount of money that a person would willingly take in order to have his arm chopped off? That's what the Gemara starts off. Sorry?
Check his brain.
Yeah, as the Gemara is going to say later, that's a crazy amount. But at this point, that's a good question. We'll see. The Gemara is going to address that. But the Gemara addresses a different question first. The Gemara says, if you're going to evaluate how much a person would take to chop off his arm, that's not only tsar. All 5 things are involved in that. All 5 payments are involved there. In other words, the person is also going to suffer from nezek and from boishis and from sheves. So that's not a good way of just evaluating the tsar. How much would a person take to do that is going to include all the things. So that's not just indicating how much the tsar would be. But Oid, says the Gemara, what's your name?
Yitzchak.
As Rabbi Yitzchak says, are we dealing with stupid people? That's a crazy amount. You ask someone how much they're going to take to chop off their arm. That's going to be, I don't know whether there's even a monetary figure a person would say for that. That can't be the way to do it. Ella, says the Gemara, new suggestion. How are we going to evaluate how we're going to just specify the tsar? We're talking about a person whose arm, Rashi already says, is basically off. It's basically the person's hand is already somewhat disconnected. It's just mechuberes begidin, Rashi says. Smusin, it's just connected with some sinews or whatever, but it's not really ru'uya l'malocha. Person's got an arm that's already somewhat detached from him, and it's not really appropriately, cannot be used for malacha. How much would such a person take who's already got such an arm, that there's only tsar involved? Because he's not going to suffer from nezek because he's already got a dysfunctional arm. How much would such a person take to chop off an arm which was already half detached already? How much would he take in order to chop off that arm? That's the amount of tsar is for a person who chops off an arm. Says the Gemara, that's also not only tsar. Such a person has got tsar and boishes. The ksifale milsa la mishkal mibesaroi la mishtiyei leklovin. It's a big busha for him in order to to cut off his hand and throw his hand to the dogs. Right? That's a busha. That's a boishes involved in there as well. So therefore, that's also not a good way to locate and just isolate the payment of tsar. even though there's no nezek involved, and maybe no sheves because he's got no devaluation because his arm's already not functional, but there is a boishus involved. So that's also not a good way just to evaluate tsar. So then the Gemara says we're going to redefine it. Elo always means we're redefining it again. We're being choizer from what we said above. Oim din kama adam roit selito liktoya lo yodoi hamuchtav lamalchus bein sam lesaif. We're getting closer to the maskana over here. We're not there yet. How much would a person take to chop off his hand hamuchtav lamalchus? Meaning, the melech came along and said on this person, off with his hand. Yeah, this guy did a crime against the king, yeah, or the queen, and the queen found out about it and said, off with this guy's hand. That's called a yodoi muchtav lamalchus. He's been prescribed by the malchus. His punishment is that he's going to have to get his hand chopped off. So the hand's getting chopped off, we'll say mimanushach. The guy's getting his hand chopped off. However, the malchus was going to do it but Sam means with some sort of potion or anesthesia, exactly, that's going to cause, it's going to be painless. This guy's going to have his hand chopped off and there's going to be no pain for some with anesthetic. Let's say, how much would a person pay in order, he's going to have his hand chopped off anyway by the malchus, and it's going to be with anesthetic. It's going to be with some. And we say, how much would you take in order to do it without anesthetic? How much would you take to do it with saif, with a knife? And it's going to be painful. How much would you take for that? And that is how we're going to evaluate the tsar involved. Because in this case, the guy was going to lose his hand anyway. So in terms of the tsar, the nezek, and the boishus, all these things were going to anyway happen to him because the malchus was going to chop off his hand. And he's going to have his value depreciated because of that as an eved on the slave market, and he's going to have an embarrassment because of that. But he's anyway going to have that anyway. So how do you evaluate the tsar? How much would this person who's anyway going to have his hand chopped off by the malchus, how much would he take in order to have it from a painless way to a painful way? How much would he take? But on that, the Gemara says that's also not good because we just said the Amri Hochanami loy shokilu mitzara nafshe. Person's not going to take any amount of money in order to have the amount of pain that it is to have his arm chopped off. So that also is not a good way of evaluating the tsar involved. So the maskana of the Gemara is Ella oimdin kama adam roitze litein liktoya lo yodoy hamuchtav lamalchus bein sayif lesam. How much would a person give? We're not talking about now take. How much would a person give? The guy's is similar to what we just said, but the opposite. The guy's going to have his hand chopped off by the malchus. However, with sayif, he's going to have it chopped off in a painful way, without anesthetic. He's prescribed by the king to have his hand chopped off in a way that's going to cause him pain. And we say to him, listen, your hand's going to be chopped off by the king. How much money are you going to give in order to have it with anesthetic, in order to have it in a painless way with a sum? So that already is an amount that a person would give. Because before we were talking about how much would you accept from someone in order to do this in a painful way, and that we said that a person's not going to accept any amount of money to do that. But if the question is if he's going to have it, he's going to have his hand chopped off. He's anyway going to have it chopped off by the malchus in a painful manner. How much would he pay to have it pain-free? That is a certain amount that he would pay. And that is the tsar that we're talking about over here. And that's how you evaluate tsar b'mokom nezek. That's what the Gemara says. The Gemara just asked one more question. Hi litoil litain miboyele. We're now going back to, if you notice at the beginning when Avua de Shmuel was the one that answered our question of tsar b'mokom nezek eichi shaminon, and he answered, how much would a person take? Come out of the word say litoil, and we now want to understand that's not really accurate. Because we're really saying now it means how much would a person give? So the Avur de Shmuel that said the answer, it wasn't so accurate what he said. He said litoil, and we really know that he meant lite. So Amarav Huna, Breder Rav Yeshua, says Rav Huna, Breder Rav Yeshua, litoil zeh mizeh ma shen litoil zeh, mizeh ma shen nosan zeh. He really means what we said. How much would a person take? How much would a person give? But it means, the way you have to explain his lashon, it means litoil zeh mizeh, how much that the victim would take from the perpetrator. That's called litoil zeh mizeh ma shen nosan zeh. What this third party would evaluate, how much he would be willing to give in order to have his hand chopped off in a pain-free way. In other words, just to say the maskonos HaGemara, it really means we do a survey, or we do a survey in the shuk. How much would a person pay whose hand is being anyway cut off by the malchus in a painful way? How much would he pay in order to do it pain-free? How much would he pay to change it from sayif, which means with a knife, painful, to sam, which is like an anesthetic? How much would he pay for that? And that is the amount that the nezek takes, so to speak, from the mazik. That's how we're explaining over here what Avur the Shmuel meant. How this is the amount that the nezek takes from the mazik, the amount that a person in the shuk would give for such a tsar. So just to summarize, the Mishnah spoke about, to make things clear, tsar where there is no nezek involved. Tsar where there is no nezek involved is just a little prick or a burn on the finger, and that the Mishnah actually says. How do you do that evaluation? The Mishnah says that clearly. If I just read that in the Mishnah for you, how much would a person take to suffer so much pain? That is an amount. That is a fixed amount. That's not having your arm chopped off. That's not a major blow to you. A little bit of a burn on your finger. That the Mishnah says, how much would a person take to inflict upon himself that much? That much you pay. That's when it's tsar with no nezek involved. That's what the Mishnah says. But the Sugis Gemara was dealing with when there was tsar with nezek, when there was a big, bruise or a loss of organ or a loss of an ava or an arm or something like that, a body part. That's the Gemara had a big problem. The person's not going to do that for any amount of money. The amount of pain that is not going to be for any amount of money. So the only way the Gemara resolved that problem was to say, okay, so we'll do it in a theoretical case where the arm is going to be chopped off anyway by the melech, which is an amount of pain which no one would accept to do, but he's got no choice because it's going to be chopped off by the malchus. But how much would he pay to change that to a painless loss of his arm? And that is how you isolate the payment of tsar by itself, and that's how you do it. So besides for the payment of nezek and boishes and the amount of losing his job and ripui, how do you evaluate tsar in this case? That's the answer. We evaluate how much a person whose arm is anyway going to be chopped off to pay to get it chopped off pain-free. And that concludes the sugya of tsar and how we evaluate tsar. Yes, Rav Ginsburg.
So that
Rabbi Yitzchak.
I am I just have a question from Mahala. The Tahalach in other words of evaluating that is similar to the survey. It's complete. Yeah, because it's based upon the person. The person has, in other words, a high tolerance for pain.
Right. So that's what the Mishnah said. Correct. It said. Adam kiyotzi bazeh. If you look at the Mishnah and also in the Gemara, it said we do the survey according to Adam kiyotzi bazeh, someone who's similar in this kind of stature. So we'll do a survey of a 40-year-old who's got this amount of good bloods and this amount of muscle. How much would he take for the amount of for things? And therefore, we try to make it more general for this case. Yeah. Okay, good. So now we're holding by the next line of the Mishnah, which said ripui. Now we're dealing with medical expenses. We've left a little bit nezek. We've dealt with a little bit tsar. We're now dealing with ripui, which was one of the 5 medical expenses. When you damage somebody, you have to pay for their medical expenses. They have to get this doctor. They have to get this medicine. You have to pay for that. So now the Gemara is going to discuss details within that payment. Ripui hikol chayav l'rapoisei. About 20 lines down from the top, 2 dots. The line starts Tonu Rabbanon. Tough nun. Baruch, question.
The Chazal coming up with a standard figure based on 40 years, whatever.
Yeah, I think
When something comes to that and they don't fall in this category, so that person, so it's not running. Listen, you cannot take this. So it's a different evaluation.
it is, and that's why I believe the Gemara never said any numbers, because even Chazal haven't fixed over here numbers. It will depend on each door of a door and in each case. It will. Tanu Rabbanon, Olu boit smochin, machmas hamaka. If a person had a makkah, he had, let's say, a bruise or he had a burn, and and machmas tamaka, there was some smochin came up, some, I think, blisters. Has anybody got a different translation? Yeah. Blisters is good. Blisters, sores or blisters came up, machmas hamaka. Vanistera, but then it got better. Vanistera, then the makkah came back. It came back. Chayiv l'rapoisoi. We're going to see the brisa. We're going to dissect the brisa in a second. You're chayiv l'rapoisoi. You're chayiv to pay ripui, which is the medical expenses, v'chayev litain loy demei shifto, and you have to pay him sheves, which is I think the correct word is compensation. I'm not sure. That means how much he's going to lose his job for the time that he's out of practice because of the makkah. That's called sheves. So the Tanna Kama holds that you have to pay ripui and sheves. We'll see in a second what we're talking about. Shaloi machmas makkah. If there are some things that happen, shaloi machmas makkah, if there's some blisters and sores that came about not directly because of the makkah, because of what you did, then you are not chayiv to pay sheves, and you are not chayiv to pay ripui. We'll see that seems to be obvious. We're going to discuss that soon. Also, if other things happen to the person that aren't connected to what you did, of course you don't pay ripui and sheves. The Gemara will discuss that soon. That's the first Tanna Kama. So the Tanna Kama basically said if they're machmas hamaka, you're chayiv in ripui and you're chayiv in sheves. Rabbi Yehuda oimer. Rabbi Yehuda is the middle opinion over here. Af machmas hamaka chayiv l'rapoisoy. If it's machmas hamaka, you're chayiv in ripui, you're chayiv in doctor's fees. The eina chayiv litan loy demei shivton, but you are not chayiv to pay sheves. Rabbi Yehuda splits it up. Ripui you are chayiv in such a case. Sheves you are not chayiv. Again, we're talking about certain blisters that came because of the wound that you caused. It's not the main wound, but some blisters came because of the wound. Says Rabbi Yehuda, sheves yes, ripui yes, and sheves not. Why? We'll see soon. The Chachamim a third shita. These are called the Rabbanon Basroi. The third shita in the Brisa, the last Rabbanon over here. Shiftoi v'refuasoi. They say there's some sort of hekish between sheves and ripui. Kol shechayev b'sheves. Anyone who pays sheves, kol shechayev b'sheves chayev b'ripui is going to pay ripui, meaning for the medical fees. She'eino chayev b'sheves, and if you're not paying for sheves for the compensation, eino chayev b'ripui. You're not chayev in ripui. And these Rabbanon they agree with Rabbi Yehuda that you don't pay sheves, and they take it a step further. If you don't pay sheves, you don't pay ripui either. They come together. These two payments come together. Because if I'm not mistaken, even the Gemara is going to say, they're in the same pasuk. The pasuk says, Rak shivto yitain v'rapo yirapei. The Torah says, give sheves and rapo yirapei. It's in the same pasuk. So the Rabbanon say, so they're going to come together. And if you're not giving sheves, like Rabbi Yehuda says, which we'll see why in a second, but if you're not giving sheves, you're not giving ripui either. So basically, there's three shitas over here in the Brisa. Tanna Kama says you're giving sheves and ripui. Rabbi Yehuda says you're giving ripui and not sheves. And the second set, the Rabbanon, and the third shita hold, you're not giving sheves or ripui. Says the Gemara, B'mai, as a question you're probably all thinking, B'mai kol mifligi. What exactly are they arguing about? What's going on? Why yes? Why no? Why the argument? What's going on? Omar Rabba, says Rabba, that was the Brisa. Says Rabba the Amoira, Ashkachtinu le Rabbanon bebei Rav. Says Rabba, I found the Rabbanon in the base of Medrash of Rav, the Yasvi, they were sitting, B'ka Amri, and they said as follows, when they were learning this Brisa, this is what they said. Hacha, b'maka nitno le'eged kamifliki. They're arguing about a makkah, whether or not you're allowed to wrap it up with some sort of bandage or bandage, let's call it. What does it mean? Rashi explains as follows. We're talking about a wound that really is it would be better if the wound would not be bandaged up, right? It would be better for the wound that it will be out in the air and it will be able to heal itself better that way. But the guy is disturbed by it, or it's disturbed in the cold. Rashi says that the tzina disturbs him, and he wants to wrap it up because he wants to be warm, or he wants to, the cold disturbs him. But the wrapping actually is what caused the blisters to come. So the wrapping, because the wrapping was there, it made the bruised or the scarred area all warm. It was mischamem. It got warm, and that caused the blisters or the sores to come. So the question is, who pays for such sores? Actually, what will be best is if the guy didn't wrap it up, and then the sores I don't think would have come. But the guy did choose to wrap it up for his own convenience, and that caused the sores. Does the choivel, does the perpetrator have to pay for these sores? Because it wasn't directly from what he did, because he caused the actual makkah. And if you leave the makkah by itself, the sores wouldn't be it. But he just chose, the victim chose to wrap it up for his convenience to save it from the cold, and that caused it. Has the victim got, so to speak, the reshus to do that in order to be mechayev the perpetrator, the choiver? So Rabbanon Savri Makkah Nitna Le'eged. The wound is given, literally means it's given to Eged, meaning Rishus was given for the makkah to wrap it up with a bandage, and therefore he's got Rishus to do such a thing. And even though it's going to get warm and it's going to cause the blisters to come, he has to pay for it. The choivel has to pay. That's why the first shita in the brisa was you pay sheves and ripui, because makkah is nitna le'eged, and therefore he's got a right to wrap it up, and you have to pay for that as well. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda Sava, makkah loy nitna le'eged. There is no reshus for a person to come along and wrap it up and cause therefore extra sores to come. And if there's no reshus for an eged means that to wrap it up, to bandage it up, therefore you do not have to pay. That's why you do not pay sheves. So why did Rabbi Yehuda say ripui you do pay? Again, Rabbi Yehuda split it up. He said only sheves you don't pay, but ripui you do. Says the Gemara, ripui the tani beikra mechayev. Tani beikra, tana means it repeated the Torah repeated it. V'rapoi yirapei. Why the double lashon? So Rabbi Yehuda learns the double lashon, explains to me that even though, so to speak, you didn't have the right to do it, but you still have to pay.
It's a grammar. It's really a grammar.
It is really a grammar, but you're opening a big can of worms about mentioning the word grammar, because a lot of the things may be also causing the guy to lose his job is maybe grammar. But let's just say for the meantime that's the gezeres hakosov of these chamisha devarim, of these 5 things. I think Abba Tachta also spoke to you, a shor that mazik is also somewhat of a grammar, but that's the parsha of nezikin that the Torah says you have to deal with. So to over here, let's leave the question of grammar. It's a whole sugya by itself, but let's leave the question of grammar for a second. Rabbi Yehuda holds that ripui the tani beikra v'rapoy yirapei teaches me that even though you had no reshus to wrap it up, but you still, even though there was no reshus of the nechbal of the victim to wrap it up, but still the chovel has to pay. But the Gemara says sheves the loy tani beikra. There's no repetition by sheves, so that's why sheves you do not pay loy mechayev. That's what the Rabbanon of Bein Rab said when Rabbah showed up, and the Rabbanon said, this is what's going on behind the scenes. Behind the scenes of this brisa is that the tzmachim, the sores, came around because of wrapping it up. And the dispute over here, the 3 opinions that speak them out, is does the victim have the reshus to wrap it up and cause these extra sores in order to be mechayev the perpetrator, the choiver. So the first Rabbanon say yes. The first opinion of the brisa is yes. The person's got full reshus to wrap it up. The guy calls him a makkah. Why should he suffer in the cold? Why should he go out in the cold and have a bad sore? He's allowed to wrap it up, even though it's at the expense of the perpetrator to pay for the shevis and the ripui, he has to pay. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda holds, but etzem, the person's got no reshus to wrap it up. He should leave it as it is. If he wraps it up, it's at his own loss, his own expense of extra sores come that require. Let me just speak out. The extra sores obviously require extra cream and extra medical expenses, maybe even extra unemployment. But he's going to have to suffer that himself, says Rabbi Yehuda, because you've got no reshus. Only ripui. There's a special chumrah the Torah says you have to pay because of the double lashon. And the Rabbanon Basra, the Gemara doesn't speak it out directly over here, but I believe the Rabbanon Basra learned this hekish from sheves to ripui, and they agree be'etzim with Rabbi Yehuda. You got no reshus to wrap it up, so sheves you're not paying. And since ripui is compared to sheves, we say you don't pay anything. You don't pay anything. That's what the Rabbanon Debei Rav said, and Rav was repeating over what they said. Yes, parents.
I can understand Rabbi Yehuda from the point of view of the knowledge that they had, how you healed wounds. But we now know that if you have a wound, usually the best thing is to clean it out. Right? You clean it out and then you put a bandage on it, right? Until such point and then you leave it to the atmosphere. Right? If you have a wound, you just wrap it up.
Right.
Then our understanding nowadays is that you can become bound, especially you fell in the dirt.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but I think even after you clean it, there's some wounds that might be better left unwrapped. Is there not such a medical?
I'm not a medical man, so
right.
I'm just
presuming there are some wounds that would be, but better for the wound to be left open. And this guy went beyond that for his own convenience and covered it. So in such a wound, that's what the dispute will be. Yeah, Raf. Yeah,
It's the depth and the width of the cut. Now there is the depth and the width of the cut. because, in other words, really, what's the purpose of wrapping it? It's to protect it. Cleaning, that's to clean it. And really, in an ideal world, it's like if you were never going to be bumping into anything or anyone, you don't need to really wrap it. You wrap it to protect it.
Right. Okay.
You know,
So that's exactly to and fro over here. Do we say such a wrapping which is going to cause extra things, right? If it will be necessary, I agree with you. If it will be necessary completely for the wound, then there'd be no discussion that he has to pay for it. This is a wrapping that wasn't necessary for the wound. Yes, Bob. We're dealing with Mammon. It's nothing to do with Knas, only Mammon.
Can we argue that this aspect will make the argument as a person sort of brought it on himself?
Right, but if he brought it on himself, then you're possible. But if he didn't bring it on himself, then it's considered a natural consequence of the wound you caused, and therefore it's included in the right.
That's one side.
The other side is it's not included, therefore you're potter from it. Not that it's a knas. You're potter from paying. You're potter from paying it, right?
We're potter on it because if I gave it, if I said yes, it would be a knas.
No, I don't think it's connected to knas. Fine. But Rabbi said to them, I don't fully agree to the way you learned it. I'm going to learn it similar to you, but a bit different. Says the Gemara, if a makkah, says Rab argued, if a makkah is loy nitna le'eged, if you got no reshus to do it, which was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, right? Rabbi Yehuda's opinion says you got no right to do it. Ripui nami loy mechayev. You shouldn't be chayav to pay for the ripui either. Even though the Torah repeated itself, Rab's arguing in Svara doesn't make sense. The Torah is going to, even though it did repeat itself, what are we going to do with the repetition? We'll see in a minute. But if really the person's got no right to wrap it up and he caused it himself, it doesn't make sense that the Torah is going to be machmir and say that the ripui you do pay. That's how he argues against it. He doesn't like this understanding. Ella says Rabbah, similar but different. Tekule alma maka nitna le'eged. Really, be'etzem, a person's got rishus to wrap it up and plaster it up and bandage it. He's got rishus to do that because it's necessary. It's not, however, there's no rishus to do extra wrapping over and beyond what you really needed to do. The minimal, you needed to do a certain amount. Again, these are the Gemaras that it's up to the Chachomim to really draw the line where it is. But in any event, there was a rishus to wrap it up, but don't overdo it. Don't overdo it with a triple, quadruple bandage and another one and wrap up further than you need. That you haven't got rishus to do. So it's a fine line. You've got rishus to do a basic bandage, but not more than that. Sorry?
This supports the Tanakama. You caused the wound, therefore, in other words, like, don't go after the victim and say, well, they made it worse. In other words, you caused the wound.
Right.
It seems to support the Tanakama.
Right. This is the case that they're all speaking about, and we'll see what they say. Right. So Tanakama would say, right, I'm not sure if this is what you just said. Tanakama would say, since you caused the wound and you got rishus to bandage it, so yeah, we can't. It's hard to draw the line, and therefore you're allowed to bandage it, and therefore you're paying for everything. Good. Rabbi Yehuda Saba Kevan the loy nitna le'eged yisera. Since you didn't have rishus for the extra, yisera means extra. Yeser for the extra eged, for the extra bandage. Ripui the tani beikra mechayev. Ripui where the Torah repeated it. That then it makes sense to say the Torah was machmir. That you'll pay for the extra shevis and ripui that you caused through the extra bandaging it, because at the end of the day it was only an extra thing, and the Torah can be machmir about that. But sheves the loy tane beikra, where the Torah didn't repeat itself, it doesn't say. It only says rak shiv toyite. It doesn't repeat it. It doesn't say v'rapoy yerapay repeats it. Sheves doesn't repeat it. Loy mechayev. You don't pay. V'rabonon savri kevan the loy tane bei kra b'ripui a sheves nami mechayev the iskish l'ripui. 1 second. V'rabonos avri came in the tani bei kraba ripui. The Torah repeated itself by ripui. Hasheves nami mechayev the ishkis l'ripui. So this is the Rabbanon means the first shita. They really hold since the Torah repeated. Sorry, they didn't really say. I thought maybe they held it as a svara, but the Gemara is saying that that's what they do from the double lashon. Ripui really is repeated. Now that ripui is repeated, they'll make a hekish to sheves and say yechayev on everything. So the first opinion holds yechayev on everything, because we learned it out from Sheves, and that's what the double lashon repeats it. So basically, you have on everything. Rabbi Yehuda Saba Sheves loy mechayev the miyate rachmona rak. The Torah, Rabbi Yehuda explains, we don't learn out over here Sheves from Ripui because it says rak shiv toyite. It says only rak. Rak's a miyate over here. It says don't learn it out from Ripui. No, Ripui you'll give because there's a double lashon, but Sheves not. Now they get fine. So let's just summarize till here. The Gemara is explaining the first two opinions that really, this is the Maskana Gemara. The dispute is talking about a case where you cause a wound to a guy, and a person's got certainly rights to wrap up his wound to a minimal degree, even though that wrapping will cause sores or blisters. You'll pay for those sores or blisters. The question is, what happens if he goes over and beyond the wrapping and wraps it excessively, that causes major swelling and heat and sweat and causes major sores and wounds? So basically, you haven't got reshus to do such a thing, and therefore, really, the person should be potter from paying for such a thing. But the Torah repeated Rapo Yerape twice to teach me that you do pay for the Ripu. So the first opinion in the Brisa says, just like Ripu you're paying extra for, Shevis is connected to that, and Shevis will also pay extra for. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it says the word rak, shivto yitain. So even though it repeated Ripu, you're paying for that, but you're not paying for the Shevis, because it says rak, only Ripu you pay, not Shevis. And the Rabban and Basra go the other way around, which we'll see in a second. If you don't pay Shevis, you don't pay Ripu. But now the Gemara is going to say, the Rabbanon rak. What do the Rabbanon, the first Rabbanon, do with the word rak? Right? Rabbi Yehuda said, we use rak to teach me you only pay Sheves and not Ripu. You don't learn out Sheves. But the Rabbanon that do learn out Sheves, and you pay everything, so rak's coming to be Mamayit. What's it being Mamayit? Says the Gemara, L'shaloi machmas hamaka hu da'asa. That's coming to teach me that you do not pay Sheves or Boishes when it's Shaloi machmas hamaka. Which means, well, as we'll see in a second what that case is, but basically some other damage happened that wasn't connected directly to the mak, you don't pay for that. That's what's learned out from the word rak. Fine. Well, the Rabbanon Basroi, says the Gemara, the Amri, according to the second set of Rabbanon, the third shita, that say, Kol shechai b'sheves chai b'ripui, Kol she'ena chai b'sheves ena chai b'ripui, ripui datana beikra lamali. According to them, the starter point was you don't have to pay it because the person had no reshus to do that. Didn't have reshus to do the extra wrapping, so therefore the baseline is you're not paying anything, not sheves and not ripui. So the Gemara is asking, so why did the Torah repeat the word v'rapo yirapeh? If it's not needed for this case of paying for the extra swelling that took place because of the extra bandaging, what do they use the double lotion for? Says the Gemara, the famous, I think this is a somewhat famous statement, the Tanya, the Bei Rabbi Shmuel, Oime, v'rapoy yirapeh, mekan shenitzan reshus l'roife l'rapois. The double lashon over here is used to teach me that a doctor has got reshus to practice medicine and to heal people. As Rashi says it, what's the chiddush over here? What do you mean? Of course, a doctor can heal. Rashi says, let me just find the Rashi. How could it be that the Torah, Hashem, Hashkafic question, the Torah, Hashem gave this person some sort of sickness, some sort of illness, and obviously Hashem wants it that way, and Hashem's planned it that way, and that's the Hashkacha Pratis. The person should be sick. Who gave the doctor the right to go and, so to speak, tamper with Ratzon Hashem? This is this Gemara. The Torah has given him reshus to do that. That's also part of Ratzon Hashem, and the doctor's got the reshus to heal, and that's learned out from V'rapoy Yirapeh. That's what the second set of the Rabbanon learned with that. They learned that the reshus has been given for a doctor to heal. So the three opinions to summarize over here are whether or not a person has to pay for extra medical expenses, that's ripui, and extra unemployment costs if the victim caused himself extra sheves and ripui by over bandaging his wounds, and that caused sores or blisters to grow. According to the first opinion of the Rabbanon, you're going to pay both for sheves and for the ripui. According to the middle opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, you're only going to pay for the ripui because of the extra lotion and not for the sheves. According to the third opinion, you're not going to pay for any sheves or ripui machmas, that bandage. That's the end of this part of the sugya. Yes, Baruch. I mean, it's not the end, we'll see in a second, but that's the end of this. Halfway through.
Where do the other two opinions get? If one opinion says the rapeh is for the shoes, it has nothing to do with the actual thing.
Right.
Where do the other?
That's an excellent question. Baruch is asking a very good question, which is, we only, according to the last Rabbanon, we said they use the double lashon of V'rapo Yirapeh to teach me the reshus that a doctor's got to heal. But the first two opinions use V'rapo Yirapeh to teach me that you pay for the extra sheves and the extra ripui that's caused through over bandaging. So where do they know, the first two opinions, that a doctor's got reshus to heal? That's an excellent question. I do not know the answer to that question as of yet. I would venture to suggest maybe they argue in Svara and hold that perhaps the Torah didn't need to give rishus. Maybe it's obvious without a pasuk, but I'm not sure. It's a good question, and I'm not sure. It's a good question. Well, we've all got homework to think. Why are not the first opinions? How they know that did? That's Baruch's question. Good. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanon. We taught in a brisa. Menayin she'im olu boit smachim. This is the hemshich of what we just said. It's a repetition. We'll see more opinions, maybe a little bit about it. Menayin she'im olu boit smachim machmas hamaka v'nistera hamaka shechayev l'rafoisoi v'chayev litin lo shiptoi. How do you know that if smachim came up, if sores or blisters come up because of the makkah, presumably according to the explanation we just said, this price has also explained, meaning that you did over excess bandaging and you caused it to come up. Even though the makkah went away, you have extra sores you have to deal with. You have to give ripui and shevis. This would fit with the first opinion we said in the first brisa. Right? You learn from v'rapo yirapeh. That's the extra lotion that you pay even for this, and we learn shevis from there. This fits with the first opinion we said in the brisa, which, if I'm not mistaken, I would probably guess is the halacha is like that opinion, because that's the mainstream opinion over here. Says the brisa, I would think you should pay even if it was shaloi machmas hamaka. Maybe you should pay for shevis and ripui, even if it was other things that happened that weren't connected to it. Tamad loima rak. That's what they use with the rak to teach me that you don't pay shaloi machmas hamaka. That's what we said about. Shalom machmas hamaka, we're going to see in a second what that means, if we have time today. Rabbi Yosi bar Yehuda oimer, another opinion of Rabbi Yosi bar Yehuda, af machmas hamaka potter. He says, even if it's machmas hamaka, you're potter for the excess blisters and sores that cause due to your excess bandaging, shenema rak. He uses that from the word rak to teach me that you're potter. Now the Gemara's got two ways of understanding what he says. Ikada omri af machmas hamaka potter legamri. Some say that Rabbi Yosi bar Yehuda exempted the mazik the chayvo legamri, also from sheves and also from ripui. That would fit with Karabonon Basra. That would fit with the third opinion of the price that we just quoted, that he's exempting legam. But some explain that Rabbi Yosi bar Yehuda didn't exempt you legamri. Af machmas hamaka potter misheves. He potted you from sheves. V'chayev ripui, but he was mechayev. He obligated a payment of ripui. When he said af machmas hamaka is potter, he meant sheves. Kaman ka'avua. Who does that fit according to? With his father. Who is his father? If we're talking about Rabbi Yosi bar Yehuda, that means his father was Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda was the middle opinion in the previous brisa, which said you only pay ripui and you do not pay sheves. So that will be two ways to understand what Rabbi Yosi bar Yehuda said in this brisa. So okay, we'll see a couple more lines if we've got time. As follows, because it's a little bit of a hemshich. It starts Omar Mar after the two dots. Omar Mar means we're going to quote a section of the brisa which we just said. Yochol afilu shaloi machmas hamaka tamad loy marak. Shaloi machmas hamaka tamad loy marak. So you're only chayav if it came blisters because of the makkah you did. If it was indirectly because of the makkah, you are potter. Says the Gemara, shaloi machmas hamaka boy kra. You really need a pasuk to teach me that you're going to be exempt for other sores and things that come up that weren't related to the wound that you caused. Why would? Of course, you're going to be exempt from that. You didn't cause it. Says the Gemara, Amri, my shalom machmas hamaka. What does it mean, shalom machmas hamaka? Doesn't mean completely indirect. It means as follows: Kedasanya, hareisha over al divrei aroife. The guy went to the doctor and he said, doctor said, use cream A or take pill A. V'ochal dvash oy kol menei mesika v'pnei dvash v'chol menei mesika koshen lemake. He didn't listen to the doctor. He took the law or medicine into his own hands, and he decided that what's good for me is to spread honey on my wound or something else on my wound, even though the doctor said to use something else. The hele makosoy gargusni. The Gemara is going to say later it's some sort of dead skin. Basically, it was damaging for the makkah. What he chose to do. I would think you're chayiv to pay for such a thing, because at the end of the day, I guess it's a bit of a hard habit, but at the end of the day, you caused the wound. And this came with the wound. The guy didn't purposefully maybe cause the damage, but you caused the wound, so you should pay for that. Tamad loy marak. You do not pay for it because that guy was negligent in going against what the doctor said, and he himself's going to suffer to pay the extra saran that came about. My gargusni, what does it mean? Gargusni om Rabbaye nasa krichta. It is some sort of dead skin, as Rashi explains that. Maya Suse, how do you heal it? Says the Gemara, Ohala, Vakira, Vakalva. It's some sort of different kind of spices. Someone's got the article, they can fill me in. Vakira, wax, and Kalba is something about in the barrels of wine. Rashi explains. Basically, sorry?
The first one, aloe is you've got aloe vera.
Aloe vera.
I think that's short for that.
Right, good.
It is used for various
Healing things.
Yeah.
Kira is
Kira
wax,
is
right?
Wax. That one is resin.
Kalba is resin. So
Resin
that,
is the sap you get from the trees.
Oh,
Also
right.
it's used.
right. Those three things mixed together would heal this problem if you put on the wound. Okay. Very good. Yeah, Boris got a question?
All three opinions.
All three ingredients.
They are.
What's the question?
All three opinions hold this, that even in this case, everyone that he has to pay.
Yes, I think so. Shaloi machmas amach, you do not have to pay. I believe all three opinions agree to this thing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.